Is it me, or has the world of Zenless Zone Zero recently started to appear less like a post-apocalyptic wasteland and more like a holiday destination? You have sparkling beaches, hip urban locales, and modern cityscapes all resting under the shadow of the hollows. It seems like the inhabitants of this so-called doom world is doing quite well for themselves, which makes me wonder, if you were teleported or isekai'd into New Eridu, could you survive the world of Zenless Zone Zero? Would you live a relatively normal life, or would the ethereals and hollows eventually spell your doom? That's what I want to discuss in this video. Before we get into that, however, if you want to see lore videos based on video games, do check out the channel and consider subscribing. Despite all the excellent places there is to visit in Zenless Zone Zero, make no mistake, it is still a rather dangerous world. Just to give you a quick recap, the world of Zenless was once pretty normal. For reasons currently unknown, however, a cataclysmic event occurred that plunged the world into chaos. Supernatural dimensions, referred to as the Hollows, started to appear all over the planet. These dark domes caused the environments within them to quickly saturate with ether energy, which can rapidly corrupt both organic and inorganic materials. The appearance of these hollows caused massive disruptions to natural habitats, critical infrastructure, and every aspect of human life, heralding the collapse of civilization itself, save for a handful of locations. New Eridu, the city in which the story of Zenless takes place in, managed to adapt to the hollows through rapid scientific progress. They found methods of coexisting with the hollows and could extract energy as well as rare materials from them. While many are still unable to enter these hollows due to the high concentration of etheric matter, a tenuous balance was struck that allowed humanity to continue surviving. Despite being able to coexist alongside them, the threat of the hollows never really went away. The dark domes continue to grow and constantly threaten to encroach on the last bastions of humanity. So while many locations appear safe, the cityscape that makes up New Eridu still exists beneath the shadow of the hollows. All in all, it's a pretty typical post-apocalyptic world. In order to figure out whether or not you might survive this world, we first need to take stock of all the dangers that might spell doom for a no-name civilian such as yourself. Just to be clear, when you are transported to this world, you're coming in with no special abilities or unique skills, you're just a normal person. Let's start off with the most obvious, the hollows and creatures that lie within them. As I mentioned earlier, hollows are dimensional rifts that appear as large opaque domes that can appear out of thin air. When one is created, they rapidly consume the physical space around them as they expand, engulfing anything and everything in their path. At the moment of creation, hollows don't typically destroy or damage the objects their boundary runs into. However, the environment within the hollow will start to progressively change. Ether energy builds up rapidly, causing large amounts of corruption to anything within the influence of the hollow. Inorganic substances decay, plant life mutates, and even physics is altered as both time and space are distorted. While the ether corruption is indeed dangerous, what makes hollows literal death zones are the creatures living within them, the ethereals. The ethereals are mutated animal or plant life that are composed of living ether and can spawn on their own or through the mutation of an existing organic creature. They often retain the shape of the original creature but can appear with multiple appendages, unique features, and often come with supernatural abilities. One commonality among them is their ether-based core, which appears as a floating black orb. Ethereals are incredibly dangerous as they will often attack any non-ether creature indiscriminately. Some among them are so powerful that it takes entire teams to pacify them, and even then, you might not be able to eliminate them entirely. While ethereals have never been documented to leave the hollows, they are still nightmarish creatures who will not hesitate to shred you to bits. Even if the ethereals never leave their home and would likely never pursue you, it doesn't mean that their home can't come to you. You see, the hollows will continue to grow and expand outwards as long as the ether energy and ethereal population within them is not kept in check. Once the ether activity of a particular hollow reaches a threshold referred to as the Zenless limit, companion hollows will then start to form around them. These are smaller adjacent offshoots of the main hollow that can grow independently from the original hollow. Unless stopped by some geographical feature like a canyon or something, unchecked hollows will continue to expand their area of influence until everything is completely engulfed. Once they creep into your backyard, the ethereals will then start knocking on your door. Now, the hollows and ethereals are definitely the primary source of danger in the world of Zenless Zone Zero. However, there is another thing that might cause problems for you. You see, ethereals are for all intents and purposes monsters, but a post-apocalyptic society has another monster hiding out in plain sight: other humans. Contrary to how it appears, the society of New Eridu is still a pretty fragile one. It takes a long time to really recover from an apocalyptic world-ending event, and New Eridu is still struggling to survive. There is relative safety and order within New Eridu, but there is also plenty of corruption and exploitation. Major corporations, secret societies, criminals, bandits, and all manner of human scum also call New Eridu their home. They often exploit the average person for their personal gain, throwing away any form of moral compass in the name of survival. In a post-apocalyptic world like Zenless, it's easy for anyone to justify their actions through the lens of wanting to stay alive. Some of these bad actors are huge corporations, which makes it hard for average people to avoid being exploited. The latest 2.0 story is a great example of this, with Porcelumex essentially exploiting workers for their own benefit. Speaking of these major corporations, the political structure of the New Eridu society is also currently in a balancing act. There is an unseen power struggle between the city governmental body and major conglomerations. While you might think this isn't a big deal given you're not really part of the big wigs here, an unstable ruling faction is a huge problem. Especially in a post-apocalyptic scenario, stability and a united front is important. If the power structure tips in one way or the other, it might lead to infighting and civil unrest. Consider this. If the protectors of New Eridu are too busy fighting each other, then who is left to deal with the hollows and the ethereals? Now, one last thing that might affect your ability to survive in this world, assuming you live in New Eridu, is the main antagonist of this story. Currently, the main big bad of Zenless Zone Zero is this group of fanatics calling themselves the Exaltists. I'm not going to go too deeply into their lore, but the Exaltists have basically one simple goal. They want humanity to embrace the hollows, and instead of struggling with life outside of them, we should conquer them instead. In order to do this, the Exaltists feel that humanity should evolve and adapt to the conditions of the hollow so that we may thrive in their ether-rich environments. How might we do that, you ask? Well, by becoming ethereals ourselves, or rather hybrids. Their plan is to essentially hybridize the entirety of humanity, or whatever that's left over, so that we may enter the hollows unobstructed. By becoming ethereals, we would have no need for food, water, or sleep, and ether corruption would no longer affect us. The problem with this is that on top of horrifically mutating, not everyone can retain their consciousness or intelligence as an ethereal. So for the large majority of people, yourself included, you will end up as a mindless beast, while the top 1% essentially controls everything. As a normal civilian, it's likely you would never even encounter this faction, let alone hear their name, as they work mostly in the shadows. However, if they were to succeed, you and everyone else around you is rightly screwed. So I'm considering them as a threat or danger to a normal life here simply because of the repercussions their goal has should they succeed. Admittedly though, little is known about them, and this is mostly based on what has been revealed so far about this particular group. Now, with all these threats in the world of Zenless, could you actually survive as a normal person? The truth is, I think you could. The dangers in Zenless are numerous, but in all honesty, you might not be directly exposed to them all that often. As an average person, you might live in the shadow of the hollows, but you'd never have to go anywhere near them. Since you have no ether resistance or powerful skills, no one would expect you to do any jobs related to the hollows. There are plenty of other roles in many different industries you could do, given there just isn't that many people around after the apocalypse. Most of the major cities are quite normal, with people essentially going about their business, and much of the political infighting involve larger corporations far beyond your reach. There also doesn't seem to be a scarcity of food, commodities, or resources, at least in the major cities, and while there is crime, it's not something that is completely out of control. Technology is also pretty advanced, with robots like bangboos to do most of the menial labor, and there is even pretty advanced AI. Even the mystery of the hollows is slowly being peeled back, and through specific teams like Hand, they are well on their way to being under control. I mean, the hollows can be dissipated if enough ethereals are defeated, so it's not like humanity is completely hopeless either. You have characters like Miyabi, Yi Xuan, and the rest of the Void Hunters who are capable of outright dispersing entire hollows all by themselves, so humanity is not completely on the back foot here. Life here gets even better if you already have a practical skill that others might not have, like cooking or computer hacking, as it can drastically improve your quality of life given there is a lack of skilled labor. The only real risk to a civilian is if those corporations or crazy exaltists end up achieving their goals, but you still have the main character working on stopping them anyway. Overall, Zenless doesn't seem like an entirely bad place to be isekai to, especially if you end up there with no powers or anything. You could live a pretty stable and normal life, and perhaps one day even die of old age. Are there prevailing dangers? Of course, but it's not an entirely hopeless situation either. As such, I'd confidently say that most of us could indeed survive in the world of Zenless Zone Zero, assuming we are isekai'd into new Eridu and not a random hollow. Now obviously, I couldn't consider every single detail here, and there are undoubtedly more dangers in Zenless, but I think I painted a good enough picture of what life could be like. Plus, the story of Zenless Zone Zero is far from over, so things might get a whole lot worse or better in the future as we learn more about this world. In any case, let's leave all of that for a future discussion, and I'll end the video here. Do you think you could survive in Zenless Zone Zero, and if you did, what would you be doing? Share your thoughts in the comments. This is a new series that I'm trying out, by the way, where I explore the world of games or anime and determine if normal people could live there if isekai. So let me know in the comments if you'd like me to cover a particular game or anime for this series. If you found the video entertaining, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and as usual, have a nice day.